Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Diablo 3 Bit Factory. My name is Phobos, and today's episode is a review episode about patch 1.0.4. I've taken a look at all of the skill changes for the Demon Hunter, and I figured, okay, a lot has changed. I should do a review episode about these skills, because basically your build options are really wide open right now. And I figured, okay, I should let you guys know what has changed and what my opinion concerning these changes are. So without further ado, let's get us started. First off, I won't talk about each and every skill, because sometimes the changes are not severely enough to talk about them. But I will talk about most of these skills and what changes are enabled with patch 1.0.4. So let's start with Acid Strike. Acid Strike with bowler shots used to be garbage. It used to be not even worth thinking about using it. I tried a few things with Acid Strike, with a few build combinations, and I have to say they improved it quite a lot. Same goes for Thunderball as well. But with Acid Strike it's kind of interesting because you don't have that AoE anymore, but you shoot 3 balls at once, and that can entail a huge tactical advantage. It depends on what situation you are in, but it is much more fun to use it now. Back then it used to be the case that you couldn't really defeat any enemies with the Acid Strike bowler shots. It really was garbage. You couldn't use it at all, in my opinion. But with a fast weapon and a lot of enemies, I'd say this is a viable choice for Inferno now. Still, I wouldn't choose this rune over something else like Hungering Arrows or Hungering Arrows with Devouring Arrow, for instance. But if you are into bowler shots, you can use it, you can make it work. So this is something you have to keep in mind. Next up we have Chakrams, and to be quite frank, I always loved the skill. It was really awesome because I really love this ninja kind of playstyle that you throw shurikens or chakrams like they call it in Diablo 3. At your enemies, and this is something I really like from the visual kind of standpoint, but the problem was they are really weak. You couldn't really make them work on Inferno-Mode because they did so less damage. It was really awful to use them on Inferno. Doesn't matter if it's Act 4 or Act 1, you couldn't really make them work in my opinion. Doesn't matter which rune whatsoever. But with patch 1.0.4 they really changed this skill a lot, and the damage is improved quite a bit. But I still have two major problems with this rune, or with this skill to be more precise. The first problem is it is still hard to aim at your targets. This is something that this skill is about. It is a AoE skill, it has more of an AoE emphasis. And if you try to hit single targets, it gets kind of tricky depending on what rune you use. Especially if you use the Serpentine rune, for instance, it is really difficult to hit single targets with it. This changes with Razor Disc, for instance. It's much easier with this rune to hit single targets, but still, the damage is not really on par if you ask me. I would still choose something over Chakrams in my opinion. You can make it work, that's for sure now, but still the damage is a little lower than with other skills, at least from how I view it. And the thing is, if you are going for a big AoE attack, you most likely are going to choose twin chakrams, and the overall damage with both chakrams are at 228% now. That's quite decent, but you have to aim for your enemies. You can make it work now, but in my opinion there are better choices still. But it's nice that they reviewed the skill and made it more powerful. The next skill on the list is Cluster Error, and like I already said in my preview for this patch, I am fully convinced that this skill was already good enough to begin with. It was really powerful and really didn't have any reason to get a buff whatsoever, in my opinion, at least from the damage standpoint. But they just increase the damage and you still have the same problems with the skill. You run out of hatred really fast and you have to make each and every hit with cluster arrow count. It is really important that you aim correctly with the skill. If you miss one time, you lose 50 or 40 depending on which rune you use or which passive skill you have. You lose 40 to 50 hatred, and that's quite a lot, and in my opinion they should have decreased the hatred. This is so much more efficient with less hatred, but instead they just improved the damage slightly. In my opinion, it is hardly recognizable that the skill is even more powerful than before, because like I already said, it was really good to begin with. Doesn't matter that it is not as good as it was before now in the patch. It is still really awesome to use and still a viable choice for Inferno. But I wish that Blizzard just went for it and decreased the hatred instead. Just buffing damage isn't always the answer, and for Cluster Arrow, in my opinion, it was the wrong choice. In case where Blizzard made it right was with multi-shot. They improved the skill so much, it is really awesome, and I wasn't really aware that they are going to change the skill as well, but they did. And what did they change? They lowered the hatred cost from 40 to 30, and if you are going to use the Fire at Will rune, your hatred will be reduced to 15 hatred. That's so awesome. You are able to spam the skill right now. Especially if you are going for the Bat Companion in your build as well. You hardly ever drain your hatred with the skill, and it really reminds me of Diablo 2 with this playstyle. You can really spam this skill, you can spread shot like crazy, and it's so much fun. It is really so much fun. I'm really satisfied with this change, and to be even more precise, in my opinion, this is my personal skill change of patch 1.0.4. I really like it. Even if the damage is not really on par with other skills, you can really make it work on Inferno, no problem whatsoever. And especially if you want to go for more damage, go with the rune Full Broadside, and you do an appropriate amount of damage, no problem whatsoever, like I already said. Now let's talk about Reign of Vengeance. Reign of Vengeance is probably the skill that most people talked about prior to patch 1.0.4 when they read the patch notes, and rightfully so, because Blizzard already stated that Reign of Vengeance was always meant to be the skill that made the Demon Hunter recognizable, but the problem was that the skill was so weak. You couldn't really make it work, especially on Inferno difficulty. And this is the skill that, in my opinion, got the most buffs or the highest buffs. They severely improved the skill in order to make it more viable for Inferno, for instance. And I tried the skill for quite some time now, and I tried the different runes, I tried the Anathema rune, I tried Dark Cloud, and so on and so forth. And I still have some problems with this skill. The same problems, to be more precise, because it is still hard to aim at your targets, because you can't really decide where the bombs are going to hit the target. It is always kind of close to you, and if you are in pursuit of something or if you're running away from something, this gets kind of tricky. It is possible to inflict a lot of damage to your targets, but it isn't as easy as it sounds, even if you do 3300 damage with one skill. And the other problem I have, and I still have this problem with the skill, the cooldown is still kind of long. It is more justified right now because the skill does so much more damage, but still, the cooldown is quite long. I guess you could say the cooldown is too damn high. And I guess most people will go and avoid the skill after all. And in my opinion, I'd still choose something over Reign of Vengeance. I think it's still kind of gimmicky, and you could make it work for Inferno now because the damage is severely improved. But in my opinion, there are still so many better choices than Reign of Vengeance that you don't have to make it work. You can, but you really don't have to. It's really gimmicky, and like I already said, don't make your life harder than it already is. And the last skill I want to talk about is Volt, because I really didn't think that Blizzard intended to do any severe changes to the skill, but they did for the Trail of Cinders rune, and this rune does the 1500 weapon damage over 3 seconds now, and that is crazy. That is really crazy, because you can basically use this skill for defensive purposes now, or offensive purposes as well. I even tried something like jumping right into the enemies and jumping right out of them right away, and it worked. You can really make it work if you wanted to, but the point is, you can never forget about this skill uses discipline, and you need your discipline for your survivability, and if you use it up too quickly in order to attack your enemies with Trail of Cinders, then you run out of discipline to use smokescreen, for instance, and that could prove to be a huge problem. So if you are going to use Trail of Cinders with Volt, I'd suggest that you use it for defensive purposes only, but if you decide to go for that, I guess you could really make it work, because if you are vaulting away from your enemies, these enemies will basically, most of the time, take insane amounts of damage, even if you are vaulting way more than once. So 1500 weapon damage, that's quite a lot. A lot of people call that imbar or overpowered OP and so on and so forth. But these people most of the time probably never played a Demon Hunter on Inferno-Mode before, and therefore can't really grasp the concept that you need your discipline for survivability and not for offensive purposes. You can use it for that, but I wouldn't suggest it. So another awesome addition to the builds of the Demon Hunter. And that's all I got for you today. Thank you very much for listening and watching. Make sure to press that like button if you enjoyed this review of patch 1.0.4 for the Demon Hunter. It's really much appreciated, and thank you in advance. And one more thing before we end this episode. The Guild Wars 2 release is tomorrow, so if you want to play Guild Wars 2 with me, make sure to follow me on Twitter or Facebook. I will post the server and my player tag there. And if you want to stick around, you can stick around. It's really no problem at all. Add me on your friend list and we can play some PvP or PvE together. No problem whatsoever. Make sure to subscribe if you enjoyed my content as well. And I will see you guys next time. Take care, have a good one, and goodbye.